Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and Chair Lindsay. Aloha. It's so good to see you. And special mahalo back to you for the partnership with the Office of Hawaiian Affairs on behalf of Native Hawaiians, whether it had to do recently with our amendment to the Violence Against Women Act to specify greater detail on Native Hawaiian women impacted by violence, and also to the amendment by my colleague, Kaili'i Kahele, the first Native Hawaiian to serve Hawaii in Congress in 35 years. Also the Violence Against Women Act. We appreciate that partnership with you. And to Chair Leger Fernandez, a special appreciation for structuring this first hearing of your Indigenous Peoples Subcommittee to include Native Hawaiians, because that is critical, that Native Hawaiians be recognized fully as the Indigenous peoples of Hawaii and as one of the Indigenous peoples of our country. And I want to just reinforce a few statistics from that perspective, as this is the first meeting of our subcommittee. We have somewhere in the range of 1.3, 1.4 million Native Hawaiians living throughout our country, somewhere in the range of 20% of all Indigenous peoples of our country. We have 370,000, of course, in Hawaii, the primary location for Native Hawaiians. I myself represent 149,000 or so Native Hawaiians, second largest number of Native Hawaiians of any congressional district. My colleague, Congressman Kahele, represents over 200,000 Native Hawaiians. But Native Hawaiians are all over our country at this point. They're somewhere in the range of 300,000 plus in California, close to 100,000 in Washington state. They are integral to many, many of our districts across the country. Native Hawaiians for 100 years now have enjoyed a special trust relationship with our federal government, which is the same basic relationship as other Indigenous peoples have enjoyed for longer than 100 years. We have somewhere in the range of 150 federal laws that recognize Native Hawaiians in particular in the areas of health, education, small business, and beyond. We have enjoyed a very, very close working relationship across the country between Native Hawaiians and their brothers and sisters of the Indigenous peoples of our country, whether Native American, Alaskan Natives. And we have helped each other to advance the cause of Indigenous peoples. We've enjoyed a very close political relationship in Congress. Certainly, Mr. Young from Alaska spoke kindly to his partnership with me, but that predated me by many years with many, many other colleagues in the U.S. House. In the U.S. Senate, we saw Senator Danny Noe chair the Committee on Hawaiian Affairs for 10 years, Senator Dan Akaka chair the Committee on Hawaiian Affairs for 2 years, and now we have our own Senator Brian Schatz, who takes the helm of the Committee on I'm sorry, I said Hawaiian Affairs, I meant Indian Affairs, Committee on Indian Affairs, our counterpart in the Senate. And so we look forward to that partnership going forward. There is so much work to be done on a bipartisan, bicameral basis, and I look forward to that. Chair Lindsay, now that I've set that stage, a quick question for you in my time remaining. This hearing is about the impact of COVID-19 on Indigenous peoples. And specifically, as from your perspective on Native Hawaiians. And so the question that I have for you is, are there federal programs that have been of benefit to the Indigenous peoples of our country in dealing with COVID-19? Again, whether it be health, education, business, or any other category that Indigenous peoples have advantaged to help with the disproportionate effects of COVID-19 on Indigenous peoples, which I think we can all agree on at this point. It's a statistical fact. But where Native Hawaiians have had trouble accessing those federal programs because either they're not covered or because they are unique circumstances for Native Hawaiians. Muted.
Relatives on the continental United States, Native Hawaiian face disproportionate threats to our physical and mental health, including non-communicable diseases, poverty, suicide, and depression, infant mortality, alcohol abuse, homelessness, and prejudices against natives. Native Hawaiians are more likely to suffer from coronary heart disease, diabetes, and asthma than non-Native Hawaiians in the state. Nearly 16,000 Native Hawaiians suffer from diabetes, and more than 36,000 suffer from asthma. Now, these Hawaiians will continue to be disproportionately affected by the economic standing of the state and its major industries, because nearly 1 in 4 Native Hawaiians are employed in the service industry closely tied to tourism in Hawaii.
Chair Lindsay,
Yes.
excuse me, Chair Lindsay. I sense my chair about to enforce the time limits as she's been so judicious in doing. So perhaps I could ask you to respond to that for the committee's benefit in writing.
We can do that.
Where are Native Hawaiians not able to access federal programs of benefit to Indigenous peoples with respect to the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19? That's the question. And I'd love to have that into our record to address it. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.